We often say, "I see it," as if just by opening our eyes, what is present before us will automatically become an undeniable truth. But that very thing that seems obvious is the thing that is most covered by illusions. We see but cannot see it. As it is, we come into contact with the world through our senses, but what we actually live with are the images, judgments, inferences, and conclusions that our mind assigns. So do we really see this question is not simply a conceptual game? It is the root of all suffering, every conflict, and every misconception that people have ever encountered in life. When they do not see correctly, their actions will be wrong when they do not see correctly. They will love wrongly, hate wrongly, believe wrongly, and sometimes a whole life can pass in error without even knowing it. So the journey back to seeing as it is not a technique, not a new way of seeing, but the removal of all that has been added to that. Seeing the process of removing each layer of dust covering the mirror of consciousness, so that reality can finally reflect its entirety, not distorted by the person looking before you reach the seeing that is conditioned by the psychology of language or the ego. We need to return to a more fundamental level than the biological level. This is where every cognitive process begins. A ray of light shines on the retina, stimulating the photoreceptor cells to create an electrical signal. And that signal is sent to the brain for processing. The so-called seeing begins from a series of mechanical, inanimate objects. Consciousness is completely emotionless and thoughtless. But from here, we do not see reality as it is, but only see a model recreated in the brain. An approximate version that is never original. The human eye does not see everything. It only sees a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. In addition to that, there are countless signals that the eye cannot perceive at all. Infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, X-rays, gamma. The physical reality surrounding us is much larger than what the retina can receive. So from the very first step, the vision is limited by the biological structure of the body. Not only that the image that the brain sees is not a real image, it is a reconstruction process. The light entering the eye does not carry color. It is just electromagnetic waves with different frequencies. It is the human brain that assigns to those frequencies the experiences of green, red, yellow. When we say the blue of the sky, actually that is not an objective attribute of the sky, which is a subjective experience created by the brain when light waves with a frequency of about 565 nanometers hit the cone cells on the retina. This can be shocking to many people. What we call reality is just a biological map drawn in the head. The eye does not see depth. The brain has to calculate depth from the difference between the images in the two eyes. The eye does not see movement. It is a synthesis of many static images that the brain has to piece together over time. The eye also does not see the whole picture clearly. The central area of the retina only covers a small angle with high resolution. The rest is a blurry area. The brain has to automatically fill in the rest with predictive memory and familiarity. Biological vision is therefore not as objective or comprehensive as we think. We can even say that the eye only provides fragmented data, and the real vision comes from the brain, from telling the story with a synthetic image. When a person looks at a familiar face, they do not see all the details. They see familiar people through the memory that is triggered in the brain. And if so, the question is whether we are seeing the person in front of us, or are we seeing an old image recalled by the brain? Worse still, the visual system is very easily fooled. We are fascinated by optical illusions and mistake backgrounds for objects, and can even see things that do not exist. The brain likes to optimize information. It removes, simplifies, and corrects what does not fit with the existing belief system. In other words, human vision is not only limited but also calibrated and subjective right from the biological level. This is not to completely negate natural vision, but to emphasize an important point. Even without ego intruding, without prejudice or language interfering, our seeing is not yet reality as it is. It is a processed biological representation. Like you are watching a movie scene through a screen but forgetting that it is just light emitted from pixels, not the thing itself. Biological seeing, so it is the starting point of every misconception. If we are not clearly aware of its limits and nature, only when we know that we are seeing through a limited and conditioned tool, then we are humble enough not to rush to conclusions, not to rush to believe that I am seeing correctly. And that is the first foundation to move towards a more open seeing. Seeing that is not limited by the retina, not manipulated by neural signals, but simply seeing without intermediaries. If biological seeing is already a reproduction of reality, psychological seeing also creates a deeper, more sophisticated, and more personal filter. Humans do not just see the world with eyes and brain, but also by the past accumulated in the mind. Every memory, experience, hurt, expectation, and unprocessed emotion all act as prisms that make what we see no longer pure reality, but a reflection of the psychological content inside. A person who has been betrayed in the past can look at every friendly action in the present with suspicion. A person who has lived in poverty can see danger in even the most normal situations. A child who grew up in contempt can carry an inferiority complex about every relationship throughout life. So what we see is no longer direct perception, it has become a projection of the unhealed inner self. Modern psychology calls this projection, a mechanism in which people unconsciously assign to others emotions, memories, or beliefs formed from the past. But Zen has talked about this for thousands of years. In a simpler way, people do not see others as they are, but see them through their own mind, a mind filled with hurt, desire, and fear. Fear will always distort perception until it is seen directly, understood, and let go of not only memories but also temporary emotions. Have the ability to manipulate perception. When we are angry, the person in front of us immediately becomes the cause of suffering, regardless of the truth. When we are in love, we can idealize the other person to the point of no longer seeing them as a real person, but as a perfect image created by us. When we are afraid, we see threats everywhere. When we are lonely, we see everything through the need to be loved and fall into illusions more easily than in contact with reality. We never see things but only see ourselves through those things. Every view is colored by an inner need. When we desire success, we see the world as an obstacle or an opportunity. When we need recognition, we see others as competitors or judges. When we want peace, we see every change as a threat. Perception is never neutral. It always serves some deep part of the heart. The need is also the root of illusion. When we expect a result, we will see signals reinforce that and eliminate the opposite. This is a cognitive mechanism called confirmation bias. We only choose to see what fits our desires, beliefs, or goals that we already have. This makes us unable to see the whole reality, but only see a piece distorted by the need. Psychological seeing is therefore a conditioned process, not by the environment, but by the content inside the human mind itself. It is dominated by layers of desires and fears that most of us are not aware of, and the danger is that those psychological layers often operate unconsciously, meaning they interfere with seeing even when we think we are being objective. Language is the most powerful tool of thinking. It helps people communicate, express ideas, build concepts, and retain knowledge. But because of that ability, language becomes a double-edged sword. It not only helps us describe the world, but also obscures the world. We no longer see things as they are, but only see the name, the definition, the concept that has been assigned to that thing. Most of the time, we do not have direct contact with reality, but live in a shell of language that covers life. Let's observe a simple situation. When you see a flower, what happens in your mind? In a split second, the brain will label the rose beautiful, red, fragrant, reminiscent of old memories. All those ideas will come in and fill the space between you and the flower. You no longer see the flower itself. You only see a collection of familiar descriptions that have been learned, remembered, and had in the past, and so that flower is no longer what is. It becomes what is known. Language is essentially a system of abstraction. It creates names to group many different experiences into a pattern. When we call an object chair, we have ignored thousands of differences between types of chairs, materials, shapes, feelings. All that remains is just a keyword, a simplification for the convenience of thinking. But that very convenience has lost the unique liveliness of each moment. We no longer see this chair, but only see a unit of chair in the conceptual system, not only objects, but also human emotions and ourselves. We are also seen through the glass of language. A person hears the word cheater, immediately builds up in his mind an image of emotional judgment. But that word says nothing about the specific circumstances, psychological process, or nature of the other person. It is a label, and when the label has been attached, the view is closed. The mind is no longer open to listening to reality. It starts working according to the available map. Language makes us see with concepts rather than directly. When we call a person friend, bad guy, lover, or practitioner, we are locking our own view into a mold. That person is no longer a living phenomenon, but only a role that fits the name we have given. And from there, all their actions will be interpreted according to that name. It is no longer something that is observed fresh. The more we learn, the more systems of language, specialized words, philosophical theories, religious. But that treasure itself becomes a barrier if we do not see its limits. Someone looks at an inner state and immediately, that is to say, impermanence, ego, consciousness aggregate. Instead of living fully with that state, they use concepts to explain, to control, to avoid direct contact. Then language is no longer a tool of understanding, but a tool to hide what is present. Seeing through language is seeing that has been conceptualized, and therefore it is no longer intact. It is fragmented, framed, and loses its liveliness. It is no longer an encounter, but an activity of finding the right word to name. But the world does not need to be named. It needs to be lived fully, touched, present together. And that only happens when the mind lets go of the habit, wanting to understand with words, to begin a contact beyond semantics. In the history of philosophy, one of the questions that haunts the deepest thinkers is, can we see reality as it really is? And the deeper we delve into that question, the more we realize an unstable truth, that all human perception is bound by cognitive structures, meaning that what we call the outside world is always shaped by the subject observing us. We never come into direct contact with reality itself, which philosophy calls reality in itself, but only live with a world that has been filtered through human perception, thinking, and conceptual framework. Philosopher Immanuel Kant is the one who laid the foundation for this perception. He clearly distinguished between phenomena, which is what appears before us in experience, and things in themselves, which is the true nature of things independent of human perception. According to Kant, we can never know what things in themselves are because everything we experience has been organized by pre-existing patterns in the mind, such as space-time, cause things that are not in things but are the operating system of humans themselves. The world as we see it is therefore not absolute reality but a structured version, to suit the cognitive capacity of mankind. Heidegger particularly emphasized that man is not a subject looking at the world from the outside, but man is a part of the world that is always inside. This means that each of our seeing is shaped by our own participation in that world. We not only observe, but also anxiously expectation, judge all those existential states implicitly determine the way we see the world, even though we are not conscious of it. For example, a person standing at a crossroads in life will see a summer rain very differently from a person who has just buried a loved one. A rain is still rain, but the seeing has changed, not because the rain itself has changed, but because the living inner world of the person seeing is dominating the entire context of perception. We do not see rain. We see my rain. And at a deeper level, phenomenology affirms every seeing is a co-creation between subject and object, between the seer and the world being seen. If every seeing is conditioned by the subject, so is it possible to have an absolutely objective view beyond the subject? Most philosophers,